This video is going to cover Roman numeral 9 on our typed outline for the Age of Exploration, and this section will go over information about African slavery. Sorry that my face isn't on here today. For some reason my webcam isn't working and I've got to try and figure out what's going on. But this is the outline that you are going to use in order to complete the information on section 9, and remember to either print this out or you can just jot it down and then take notes as you watch the PowerPoint. We know that farming and mining in the New World called for a large number of workers. And if you remember, we've already talked a little bit about how the Spanish were using Native Americans for a number of years as laborers. But we also know that that is going to decline and they're going to switch over to using Africans for a variety of reasons. So if you look at your number 2, it says with the depopulation of the Native American Indians, we know that slaves from West Africa, specifically Ghana. If you look at this map right here, there's a, you can see right here the country of Ghana. So this is West Africa and Ghana is located right here. So Africans were being brought to the Americas from Ghana in West Africa. Most of the slaves did come from this particular area. So this slave trade began around the year 1500. And if you remember, we've mentioned this before, Portugal was the first to begin enslaving Africans. Remember the encomienda system we talked about, and Portugal was the first one to use it in Brazil because they were growing sugar there. And so they had a large number of sugar plantations that required workers. So they began to bring in Africans to work on those plantations. You can see on your 3A, between the years 1500 and 1870, about 9.5 million Africans made the trip to the New World. So what we're going to take a look at next is this journey of the Africans coming across the Atlantic Ocean to one of a few different destinations. As you can see with this map, we have a variety of locations where Africans were destined to go. You have over here in West Africa, many of them left from this location and they were taken to either different parts of South America. You can see Brazil had a large percentage, I believe that says about 38%, which is where most of the Africans ended up. Others ended up in the West Indies and different parts of North America, which we'll get to here in a moment. So if you look at your number 4 on your typed outline, it says that Africans heading to the Americas were part of the triangular trade. Now there's a little note that says see map. I uploaded onto Canvas a similar map like this for you to you can either print it out or you can refer to it as you study this information. It's a great visual so you can see where the triangular trade is actually taking place. We know that the countries involved in triangular trade are, and this is on your 4 little a, Europe, specifically England, as you can see here, I'm circling it, there's England. Africa, specifically we talked about West Africa. The West Indies, okay, because eventually there will be Africans taken to the West Indies, as well as British colonies along the Atlantic coast. Now there's different versions of a triangular trade. There's one, again, that you could see where Africans were taken to Brazil. But this one focuses on over here in the West Indies. So I'm going to use this one as an example. So let's take a look at the different stages, or what they would call legs, of triangular trade. The first leg was basically the journey from Europe to Africa, where goods were exchanged for slaves. African chiefs willingly played a role in the slave trade. So let me start explaining this first leg of triangular trade. So what would happen is either English or Spanish traders would leave their area in Europe. They would take their ship and dock it off the coast of West Africa. They would meet with African chiefs who willingly had some of their either their own people who were considered criminals and they did not want them any longer in their tribe, or possibly they had some enemy tribesmen that they were wanting to trade with the Europeans to get certain items. So you can see here, slaves were exchanged for items such as gold, guns, and alcohol. So make sure this is going under your little b for the explanation. So these African people were exchanged for these items. So what would happen is the Africans would be loaded on the ships, and the second part of the triangular trade journey is known as the Middle Passage. This is when the ships are leaving Africa and they're headed to either the West Indies or eventually when the English start setting up their colonies in North America, they obviously will have Africans in that particular area. We know in South America, I showed you areas like Brazil. So this Middle Passage is the transfer of slaves. They're being taken from Africa and basically dropped off in one of these locations. It says here that they are sold in exchange for molasses, which is sugar. We know that this Middle Passage of triangular trade was the most difficult. 20% of Africans died on this particular journey from disease, because on those ships we know disease would spread very, very quickly. There was often starvation because sometimes, again, there's not enough food on those ships to feed everyone, and those ships may end up being out in the ocean longer than expected, so food may run out. There was often abuse on these ships because we know that a lot of the Africans were resisting, as would anybody, and often there was suicide by the Africans who had had enough and would rather take their own life than go through this process. So unfortunately, many of them did not make it. They didn't survive this particular journey at all. The final leg of the journey of this triangular trade was the transporting of goods from the West Indies, or if we're talking about the Americas, those goods will be transported back to Europe. And I'm talking about things like cotton, sugar, tobacco. And what happens is, it says here on your little d that that sugar or molasses was taken back to places like England, and it will be processed into rum, which is a form of alcohol. And then the triangular trade process starts over again. You know, those manufactured goods, guns, rum, they might take that cotton and make certain types of clothing. So all of that will be put on ships and taken to West Africa to exchange for more African people. So like I said, it is basically a continuing triangle that goes on for many years. This triangular trade map is a great example. Again, you see the goods are being taken from places like England They're sent over here to the Gold Coast, which is West Africa, exchanged for African slaves, who are then taken over here to either the West Indies or the North American English colonies. And there they are exchanged for cotton, sugar, tobacco. All of those things are grown here in North America. We also know sugar and cotton is grown here in the West Indies. So those items are transported to Europe, where they're made into manufactured goods, as you can see here, and then the cycle starts over again. If you look at your number 5 and 6, there are some very important numbers that you need to write down. On number 5, about 33%, which is a third, of the African people were sent to Brazil. So you can definitely say that most of the Africans were sent to Brazil. And again, the Portuguese got all of that started. 5% on number 6 went to present-day southern part of the United States. Now, I asked the question, why here? Why not the northern part of what we call the United States? And that should be a very simple answer. Because in the southern part of the U.S., we know that their economy was based on agriculture. Okay, that was their livelihood. And workers were always needed for the tobacco and the cotton farms located in the southern part of the United States. They had large numbers of plantations where they would house the workers, and again, this was a common practice. So we know it wasn't until about the 1800s that triangular trade will finally be abolished. So it was conducted for well over 300 years by Europeans, but it did finally get abolished in the 1800s. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video because we have one more section in this chapter, and that is dealing with the Columbian Exchange.